just want to formally introduce myself. My name is Blake Kimsey. I'm the executive director at writingworkshops.com. You might have heard of this author talk tonight through us or through Gemini Ink. We are based in Dallas, and Gemini Ink is based down in San Antonio. And once a month, believe it or not, since 2020, since the spring of 2020, we have been getting together like this to feature great, invigorating author talks, conversations that bring us all together from wherever we're dialing in from, parts unknown, once a month. And I kind of can't believe that we've been doing this, Alexandra, for 4 years. And it's just been a real joy and a real pleasure. And I myself have gotten to hear so many great conversations in the last 4 years. So we're really thrilled to present tonight Ramona Reeves and Cassandra Lane. We're really excited that you all are here. And I'm going to hand it over to Alexandra. She's going to say a few things about Gemini Ink down in San Antonio. They're a writing center like us. And before I do, I just want to thank, call out the NEA for the grant that's allowed us to support this ongoing series, which we call the Big Texas Author Talk. It's essential support for arts organizations to bring events like this into your home. So thank you for being here, Alexandra. Thank you 4 years on for doing this once a month. And I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Blake. And everyone, Blake's quite a force. Okay, he's a great partner in crime when it comes to literary events. So as Blake said, my name's Alexandra Vandekamp. And Gemini Ink, if you don't know, we're San Antonio's Writing Arts Center, and we're in our 31st year, everyone, as the Center of Writing Arts in basically the South Texas region. Our mission is to teach the craft of writing to people of all skill levels so they can bring their stories to life. So we love creating programming around storytelling, bringing great writers and readers together, and helping people of all backgrounds and skill levels bring their stories to life. So I love the Big Texas Author Talk because you see how these great stories are brought to life, and you hear a little bit maybe about the behind the scenes realities of what made that possible. So I'm really thrilled to be featuring Ramona Reeves in her debut collection of linked short stories. And we have a wonderful guest moderator, Cassandra Lane, coming in from Los Angeles. I want to just briefly introduce both of them, and then I'm going to hand the virtual mic over to Cassandra, who will conduct an author talk with Ramona for about 40-45 minutes. And then please use the chat, post comments, leave questions. There is an audience Q&A with Ramona at the end. We'd love you to be able to take part in that. So just a few things about our two featured writers tonight. Our moderator, Cassandra Lane, is winner of the Louise Merriweather First Book Prize and author of We Are Bridges, published by Feminist Press, which NPR called, quote, a stunning contribution to what must become our collective memory, unquote. Lane received her MFA from Antioch University, LA. She formerly worked as a newspaper reporter, high school English and journalism teacher, college admissions advisor, senior writer, and community relations manager for the Dodgers. That's an impressive palette of jobs, Cassandra. That's pretty cool. Her stories have appeared in the New York Times Conception series, the LA Times, the Times-Picayune, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and multiple anthologies. She's the editor-in-chief of LA Parent Magazine, and we're delighted to have her joining us tonight. And then our featured author, just a few words about Ramona. She won the Drue Heinz Literature Prize and the Sergio Troncoso Award for Best First Book of Fiction from the Texas Institute of Letters in 2022 for her debut collection called It Falls Gently All Around and Other Stories. She was a recent fellow at the San Ysidro Writers Residency and a 2024 judge for the Flannery O'Connor Award for Short Fiction. Her work has appeared in Post Road, the Southampton Review, Pembroke, New South, Bayou Magazine, I'm so sorry, I'm from New York, please forgive me, Bayou Magazine, okay. Texas Highways, and others. He teaches a course for writers working on their first manuscripts and will be teaching at the Desert Nights Rising Stars Writing Conference later this year. Woo woo! That's at Arizona State University. And I think Sheila Black is in the house who's running that. She and her wife currently call Austin home, and she has so much great praise about her book, Ramona. I'm just going to give you one example. And it's from the lovely fiction writer and poet Kevin McElvoy, who we actually lost a year or two ago. He's a wonderful, wonderful contemporary author. But he had these wonderful things to say about this collection. These surprising, wonderfully funny stories glow with comic energy. The 11 pieces in It Falls Gently All Around serve as chapters in a deeply satisfying portrayal of characters facing the expiration dates on their old beliefs and their newly acquired convictions. Ramona Reeves has fully brought to life a cast of flawed, breaking people with bravery and resilience to spare. This book is a triumph of wise and compassionate storytelling. And with no more to say there, I'm going to pass it over to Cassandra.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Ramona, for inviting me. I'm so excited to be in conversation with you, my fellow Southern sister. Thank you to Gemini Ink and to the writing workshops and to all of you for being here. I love this book so much so that I matched it. Earrings and shirt. Love it, love it. So let's get into it. Ramona, how are you?
I'm doing great. And, I don't know, honestly, if I was more excited to talk about the book or to talk with you about the book. Like, let's, if that makes sense. We haven't seen each other in a bit. I think we were telling Alexandra before we got on with everyone that we met through A Room of Her Own years ago, when they used to have conferences and things. We served on a council for that organization. So it's great to have you here and great to be talking with someone. As I said, I really wanted to talk to somebody else who was from the South, and I knew you grew up in Louisiana and Gulf Coast too. I mean,
Yes.
do you consider yourself Gulf Coast or?
Well, I grew up in a little town called DeRitter, so it's almost on the Texas border, and then I went to school in northern Louisiana in Monroe, but my last and most beloved city was New Orleans. So that's where I lived for about 6 years before moving to LA. And, reading, I don't have a whole bunch of Southern friends out here. And so reading your book and just remembering, that you're from Alabama, it was like going home. So thank you for that. You can take a girl out of the South, but you can't take the South out of the girl. And I never wanted it to be. So such a joy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So It Falls Gently All Around is a deeply immersive Southern experience. I truly haven't read a book in a long time that felt so deeply Southern, especially in contemporary times. From all your sensory details about Mobile, Alabama, to turns of phrases that are inherently Southern, to dialogue so spot on, I could hear each of the characters' voices and see their expressions. There's something about Southern people's facial expressions too, and I could see those expressions as I was reading. We're from different parts of the Deep South. I've lived in Los Angeles for 23 years now, but reading it, like I said, has felt like coming home for me. Can you talk about the South as character in your writing specifically and why it resonates so deeply for those of us who are from the South? Did you intentionally set out to write a quote unquote Southern book, or is it just that that's inherently who you are despite where you've lived and been in your life? How did you consciously and unconsciously use the South to add depth to your characters and their experiences?
Yeah, great questions. And I really grapple with the idea of South as place and South as a character. First, let me just say thank you to Gemini Ink and Writing Workshops Dallas and Cassandra and everyone who's here. It's really a pleasure to see so many of you here. Thank you. But back to your question before I forget everything you asked. I took some notes. I think it's interesting that you were in LA for 23 years. I've been in Austin for 21. And as much as I absolutely feel tied to Texas in so many ways, you know, I also feel that famous, I'm going to probably, you know, get it wrong, but it's James Baldwin, you know, he has a story in which he wrote something like, you know, you don't have a home until you leave it, and then you can never go back, you know. Although I think as writers, we're lucky because we can go back, you know, in language at least. And I felt it's interesting you say it was a little like coming home for you, because it was writing it for me was like coming home. And especially when I knew it was going to get published, I realized it was in a certain way like a love letter to that place that I was, you know, that I'm from. Maybe a weird love letter, but
It's complicated. The South is complicated.
like the South is complicated, but as far as this place as a character, you know, I'm thinking when I've read a novel or short stories and I've thought to myself, oh, this place is a character, I feel like it's been because, and I hope this is the case with my book, that that it's because the place is so ingrained and part of the people, the characters in the book. At least that's what I was trying to do, because place is a character. I mean, I think of character motivations and dialogue and you know, descriptions and gestures, and I guess, you know, a place can certainly do those things and speak through characters. You know, for example, trees. There are a lot of trees in my book.
I love
And I don't know, I haven't really looked, but it could be that when characters are feeling vulnerable, or when they're brushing up against either their own history or just history in general, that that's when they're noticing those particular details. You know, because trees in the South have there's a lot of culture and history and just lots of stuff caught up in, you know, trees.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, I thank you for saying that it feels like a character, because to me that's kind of equivalent to saying these characters are really ingrained in this place. Which makes me think of Dorothy Allison. I know I'm kind of going all over the place as my brain works, but she in an essay said, you know, place is people. And you know, that's what I take that to mean, that you know, it's not just landscape or writing about grass, lovely grass, or the sky. And I love to write about the sky, but you know, it really goes deeper. As far as I didn't set out to write a Southern book per se, but you know, I guess from somebody else's point of view, I'm not sure I could write any other kind of book in a way, because in terms of fiction, because I do come from the Deep South. It's in me, as you said, you know, and it's part of my experience. So that that certainly comes through. And I'll say one more thing about place. You know, before I started writing this book, I was reading or I read Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio, and Elizabeth Strout's Olive Kitteridge. And so I was thinking about, those books are not specifically about place, really. There are these characters in these places, but those had a really deep influence on me. And I wondered, you know, I guess those were sort of the starting board for thinking, could I do something like what they're doing, but in Mobile? Yeah. So anyway, this is a really long answer, but yeah, I do hope that the book does represent something of the South. I also hope that, I mean, you know, that there's diversity, because the South is not a monochrome, you know. I try to, you know, so I have some characters like, you know, Lee Hong and Deirdre and, you know, Rob and Penelope and other folks. I wanted Corinne. I wanted there to be more diversity. So I was thinking about that too, and, you know, thinking about the renovated house of Southern literature. That and I didn't make up that phrase. That's from another Southern writer, namely Smith. But so I hope my book falls into that place.
I love that. And it's so interesting to me that the book starts in the early 2000s, which is right when I left. I left the South in 2001, came to Los Angeles. So it's interesting. I felt like I was kind of playing catch up to this new, quote unquote, new South through your book, through your characters. And just for the audience's sake, in case people haven't read it, can you just briefly give a couple of examples of some of those characters you mentioned and what they represent in terms of diversity, like Green and some of the other ones?
Corinne and her partner are two lesbians, two queer women. So there's a story in her point of view where they have a baby shower at this country club, and she and her partner come from very different backgrounds. Corinne from a more affluent background, and her partner from the very opposite of that. And then there's Deirdre, who you know, for me is sort of the she's Black and she's middle class, as well as Penelope, who's a nurse. Deirdre's an accountant, because there is, you know, this Mobile is a majority minority city. I think I said that right now. And it is, you know, that middle class is strong and exists there. And then Rob is, you know, a minister. So a Black minister who runs a large church in the city. So, and then I mentioned Lee Hong, I think, who is Vietnamese. And if you don't know, I mean, a lot of people saw Forrest Gump, you know, the shrimp boat industry, that industry is still strong there. But it is largely actually run by Vietnamese fishermen now, have taken over a lot of that. So
that makes me think of New Orleans and the Vietnamese community there, and how those two cultures merge to create, you know, different dishes. And
oh yeah.
And I don't think, you know, outsiders necessarily realize that about the South, that there is diversity.
Oh yeah,
in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one more question about South as character and South as place. What you do so beautifully in this book, yes, you are a master at describing landscapes and place, but all of that comes through, it doesn't just stay in the setting. It comes through the way the characters talk. Just in imagery, not just the way they talk in terms of, you know, their dialect, but in the imagery, which I thought was very refreshing and a new thing. Just the way they think reflects the Southern landscape. Some of the turns of phrases and metaphors reflects the landscape. So it's not just, oh, here I'm going to describe this street or this park in Mobile. This is who they are. This is how they think. This is how they love. This is how they speak. And now that we've whet your appetite, Ramona, could you do us the favor of reading for a bit from your beautiful collection?
Sure, absolutely. The story I'm going to read from, which Cassandra asked me, she gave me a couple of different options, and I thought I picked one of those because I hadn't read from it very much. I'm going to need to do a little setup. So there's two main characters in the book. One is Donnie. He is a ex-trucker at this point, who is sobriety challenged and who has found yoga and wants to be a yogi and own a yoga studio. Currently, however, he just became assistant manager at the Y Stop, which is a truck stop that several of the characters meet at in the book. And he has been promoted to that position over someone who worked there for many years, a female coworker named Marty. She has asked him to ride along and check out this new car that she has, which is not really new. It's used, but it's new to her. But it's under false pretenses. So he goes on this ride, ends up at her house because she says she can't find her license. She goes inside. When they get there, her boyfriend and a friend are moving furniture out of the house. So it's clearly a breakup situation. Donnie doesn't want to get involved, but eventually finds her license in the glove compartment, says, okay, I'm going to go inside and get her. We can get back to work. Stops in the yard when the two men ask him to help move something. One of them offers him a beer, which he takes, unfortunately. And then he goes into the house to let Marty know that he's found her license. Oh, and on the way there, the boyfriend happens to mention when Donnie mentions the license, that, yeah, she always keeps it in the glove box. So clearly he's there for another reason. So I'll start there. The story is called Anniversary, and set in 2007. Oh, and one more detail I will give you about the car is when he gets inside this car that who knows where she's gotten it, there are license plates from several states under his feet and the floorboard.
Hilarious.
Okay, so he's going into the house. Inside the house, he expected to find Marty rummaging through drawers. He found her instead slouching on the cushions of her corduroy couch and flipping through a magazine. A thicket of wires protruded from the opposite wall where the TV and entertainment center had been. Jeff had pretty much cleaned out the place. Aside from the couch, there was an end table the color of a water bug's wings next to the front door. And opposite the end table was a pine rocking chair, sponge painted every color Marty could get her hands on. Donnie gripped the beer can more tightly with his right hand. Probably won't find your license there. She jumped at the sound of his voice. I was taking a little break, she said. Her eyes shifted to his right hand. Who's the beer for? For you, he said. What else could he say? That he planned to pop the top and guzzle it in the bathroom, chew a mint afterward to hide his breath? It was beside the point. What kind of person took breaks with her boss outside waiting? Marty's lack of sense proved once again how lucky it was for the Y-stop he'd gotten the promotion. He held up her driver's license. Don't tell me it was in the glove compartment, she said. Donnie recalled Jeff's words. I didn't say where I found it. Well, maybe it's good you're here. Jeff will think twice about acting up with you around. Donnie tossed the license onto the beat-up end table as Marty's words sank in. The ride and missing driver's license had been nothing but ploys to get him here. Take me back to work, he said. He could not tolerate lies. Marty picked up her car keys from the couch. I'm sorry, I just wanted to even the odds. 2 of them, 2 of us. She slid her biker boots across the dirty orange carpet, which might have been new in the 80s, and snatched her license from the table. Yeah, okay, she said, let's go. Defeat softened her voice and almost changed his mind about leaving. He remembered the beer and said, I need to go to the bathroom first. He could chug the beer in no time and tell her he'd poured it out when he returned. Make up your mind, she said. The front door opened and Jeff and his buddy entered the house. You're not taking anything else, Marty yelled and ran toward the kitchen. The 2 men followed. Donnie decided this wasn't his fight and slipped into a coat closet and closed the door. He knelt under a rack of coats and several plastic totes hooked over hangers, most filled with Mardi Gras beads. He sat the beer on the floor and shined the dim light of his phone onto his surroundings, a stack of Inquiring World magazines, a few cigarette cartons, and a box of broken dishes, and on top of the magazines, an aluminum pail filled with candy bars of the kind sold at the store. His right palm felt wet with beer can sweat, a reminder he could pass the time with an old friend of sorts, at least until Jeff and his buddy were gone. He picked up the beer. Move, he heard Jeff say in the other room, and put down the rolling pin. Donnie considered letting go of the beer and helping Marty, his employee and maybe his friend. He'd watched a half-hour video on breaking up fights as part of his promotion. The couple in the video sat across from each other at a polished table, while a woman in a light blue suit sat between them and asked questions. The couple stopped shouting, listened, and pondered her questions. But Jeff and Marty looked nothing like the fancy couple who drove off in their matching German cars at the end of the video. Make me, he heard Marty say. Donnie was certain Jeff wouldn't back down from that invitation, yet his feet stubbornly refused the call to action. The beating in his chest mounted. He held the beer can against his face and told himself one sip might undo the countless AA meetings and mornings of yoga. He stared at the can and recited slogans in his head. Fake it till you make it. Let go and let God. The words only confirmed his powerlessness to stop. Jeff cursed in the other room. Feet shuffled. A heavy object crashed against a wall. Donnie took advantage of the commotion to pop the top and take a sip. He planned to gulp the entire can until the front door slammed and a bowling bag on the shelf above him landed on his head. He managed to hold on to the beer, but yelped. The closet door opened and Jeff stood in its frame laughing like a man who'd killed his first deer. Oh, hell, he said. Look at this wuss. His buddy peeked around Jeff. and chuckled. He ain't worth it. Jeff turned to go, and his friend followed as Donnie slowly crawled from the closet and tried to stand. His head was throbbing, but there wasn't any blood. Folded against the opposite wall, Marty rocked and held her head to her knees. He felt guilty at the sight of her. He let her down. He knew the right thing to do and tracked Jeff through the front door. That's it, Marty said. Go after him. He felt angry about sipping the beer, angry at Marty for dragging him here, angry at himself for riding along, but most of all, he felt angry about his life, promotion or no promotion. He made it to the last step of Marty's porch, just shy of the yard, when the laughter came on wicked and unrelenting. He sank to his knees before dropping to all fours. He covered his mouth with one hand but could not breathe. He removed the hand, tried to stand, but knelt instead. He crossed his arms and lifted his face toward the street of satellite dishes and maimed cars and screamed. The laughter at last subsided, but Jeff's buddy was already seated inside the truck, and Jeff stood on the driver's sideboard with the door open and the engine running. Some friend you are, he shouted, and crazy to boot. Donnie shot toward the truck, and just as quickly, Jeff hopped in and took off in a cloud of fumes and red dirt. Crammed with thrift store furniture, the truck broke free of the driveway in a great clatter. The doors of the entertainment center flew open and shut twice in a decisive bam, bam. The report of the sounds unhinged Donnie, made him want to run, although he couldn't say why. I heard you laughing, Marty said, when he slunk into the living room. You got a bizarre sense of humor. She sat on one end of her couch with her legs crossed and held his beer can to the cut on her forehead. In her other hand was a half-eaten candy bar. I can't help the laughing, he told her. And I didn't drink any of that beer. It spilled. He saw no point in telling her he'd taken a sip and went into the kitchen to look for an ice pack in the freezer. When he returned and offered her the ice, she accepted it and pressed it against the welt on her forehead before sipping the beer. Her brown candy wrapper lay on the carpet. Watching her drink, he felt both relieved and sad. Her unintended gift to him of another sober day also meant losing the thing he loved most. She slid closer and leaned against him the way a younger sister might do, and resettled the ice pack onto her head. I know one thing, she said in a quiet voice. I'm not taking him back, at least not to live with. From his own failed marriage, Donnie understood that love gone wrong was impossible to separate from the part worth saving. Just breathe, he said. I tried your breathing and yoga stuff before, remember? Didn't work for me. Not everyone was cut out for yoga. Marty was better at sitting and slouching. But everyone needed to breathe. Why, Jeff? He asked. He drinks too much. He's unstable, and he's cheated on you. Marty sighed. Sounds like a lot of people at one time or another, don't you think? Donnie considered that maybe she'd been a better friend than he realized. He thought about how she'd congratulated him when he got the promotion she wanted. He sat in AA meetings week after week and listened to strangers talk about desperation and forgiveness, but had ignored this woman who knew plenty about both. Sometimes she lacked judgment, but she deserved better than him, better than Jeff. You should get rid of those license plates, he said. This seemed the best advice he could offer. Yeah, there ain't no telling where Jeff got it. Her tears eased, and she wiped her face on his sleeve. The car's probably stolen. She giggled, and he laughed too, a natural, easy laugh.
Beautiful, beautiful. So much. I mean, it's thrilling, it's harrowing. We don't know what's going to happen. There's suspense and action, but so much humor and tenderness as well. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
This book is a collection of interconnected stories, as Blake was saying earlier, where much to our delight, we get to see the same characters over and over again throughout the book with a close third-person POV for various characters. Their structure and character development are so strong that it feels like it could stand as a novel. Now, from my point of view anyway, what makes this book a short story collection versus a novel? So I've read lots of short story collections that don't, they feel like short story collections. This feels like both, like a collection, but also so close to a novel.
Yeah. Yeah, some people do tell me that it reads like a novel, and I've gone to some book clubs where they'll forget that it's a collection. They'll say, "Well, in your novel," and and I think so. I think it feels different to different readers. For me, I did initially try and actually sell it to agents as a novel.
Okay, I was
Um,
wondering. Okay.
yeah, and I got some really good feedback, but ultimately, it they wanted me to like make more like chapters and tie things more, bring things in more tightly. And I thought about doing that. I think I attempted to do that somewhat. It just wasn't really working. And I think it's because I really was exploring different characters' lives and the community as a whole, sort of this place. And so I think because of that, those stories meander. It's
Mm.
not this sort of you know, I don't think it has the same sort of like a propulsive arc like something like Tommy Orange's There. I don't know if you've read that, but I do put that definitively in the category of novel told in stories. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but
Laura Overall's sweet, soft, plenty rhythm too. It's multiple characters told from multiple points of view, short, bursts of stories.
I have that book. I haven't read it yet.
Yes. Similar to that. I think,
I'm gonna
yeah.
I'm gonna put that here. Yeah, so um I don't know. Ultimately, I mean, I I liked I like the decision that I made. I mean, I'm happy with the way that the book turned out. I think that the way that it is the way the material wanted to be,
Mhm.
which sounds strange to, I guess give the material a brain, but
Oh, no,
that is our
absolutely,
heart. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. Somebody's asking for the title of that book. Yes, I absolutely believe that we have to, like we listen to our characters, listen to what, like a piece of music, what does this want to be structurally?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I guess there is the, you know, having a form that is propulsive like a novel, like I mentioned Tommy Orange's book. I mean, that is quite the scene at the end if you've read it. And um, you know, but then some of it is also there's the side of the form and the craft, right? Is it
Mhm.
an interconnected short story collection or is it a novel told in stories? And then there's like, when it gets to be published, the marketing side.
Right,
Is
right.
it is
Much
it,
of it is
you know,
marketing.
this
Mhm.
is interconnected short story collection, but we decided it's a novel because we think novels sell better. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's, because I look at something like Olive Kitteridge,
Mhm.
um, it was sold as a novel, and I didn't remember that. I went back and read it, I think last year, and it said stories, and it said a novel, Olive Kitteridge, a novel, and I had remembered that it was stories,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it actually says a novel. So that's interesting to me that, you know, uh, so I guess there's two sides of that, whether you're coming at it from the craft perspective on that question or the marketing perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting because we see your characters throughout the book, and there is an arc, for these characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of characters, how did you decide which ones would get their own POV chapters, for lack of a better word? And can you talk about which characters were more difficult to create and follow versus which ones were easy as pie and why?
Sure. Um, so initially I started this book in as part of a class, and there were writing exercises in a class I was taking with Robert Boswell in my last year of my MFA, which was a 3-year program in Las Cruces at New Mexico State University.
When was this, Ramona?
New
How long ago?
Mexico State
Oh, how
University.
long ago?
Oh gosh, 2009, 2010. Long.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah. So the kernels of the first stories came from that class. And so from that class I got I think the first character was Babby, and I thought, okay, she's going to be my point of view character. And then Donnie showed up, and I couldn't choose between them, so I just thought, okay, I'm just going to have two main characters. That's how this is going to work. And then, I think they just each started to show up. Babby has been married 3 times and has had a stint as a call girl at one point in her life. And so she was married very young at one point to uh, a man named Rowan, who ends up being, is from this very affluent family, and they have sort of this unspoken connection and stay in touch over the years. And he ends up actually getting her a job at a hospital where she currently works when the book opens. So I knew that Rowan, because their story is the one story that is not from 2005 to 2015. It
Right,
goes
I love that.
1985.
1984, right? Okay.
1985, yeah. I knew that he would have a point of view story, because he's an important character. And then when I met his wife,
Yeah.
Claire, I won't say I liked his wife, but I thought, oh, okay, let's see what's up here, you know.
Very interesting. Mhm.
So it's just, that's kind of how it went. And then when I met the same thing with Faye, who owns the Y Stop,
Love
she
that.
shows up in the story I just read, Anniversary, at one point, and when she showed up, I was really taken with her. And then I started to hear her voice, and I thought, okay, Faye, you know, we're
Yeah,
even,
yeah.
you know, and so it just kind of went like that. But I did write stories and some other characters' point of views, but they just didn't seem to work. Some of it could be, you know, I have Babby and Donnie, and I am sort of working with exploring class. I have Babby and Donnie on one end of the spectrum, and Claire and Rowan on the other. And then like I mentioned, Faye, and then I have Karen, who I mentioned earlier, with her partner. It was very important for me, you know, because of who I am, to have a queer point of view character.
Yes.
So that's just kind of how it went. I started trying to write Deirdre, but ultimately I just, you know, there's a lot of conversation among writers about what stories we can or ought to write, or, you know, especially if they're far out of our sort of voices. And I don't know, I just ultimately, I think a lot about people who have come before, people who are still coming up. I hope there will be a lot more books about Mobile. And so you know, I know people have already written probably Deirdre's story better than I could write it, and will, you know, hopefully write more of them after me. So I just left it.
Yeah.
But
Wondered about that. And I don't doubt that you could do an excellent, because you have you're so skilled at that interior life. I mean, look at the way that you wrote male characters, Rowan and Donnie. I mean, it's so authentic to, oh, this is how this is how guys think. Like, you're all the way in to their interior lives, and it's such a nice balance between their interior lives and the external world, and dialogue. The dialogue is, as I mentioned earlier, so spot on. So as an experiment, I was wondering if we were going to see Deirdre, and I was willing to go there, even, you know, even as a Black woman and reader.
yeah, I did think about it. I mean, with all the characters, though, whether they were a POV character or not, I mean, though, I did interrogate them all. I mean, I always try and do a revision with just peripheral characters, just to see what they're doing, you know, how they're pushing the story forward, what their part is in the story, if they feel full, you know, in the story. So I will say that. But, you know, I don't care what character you write. I mean, I think you mentioned that, like, writing the male characters. I think as a writer, whether the character themselves is empathetic or even whether you like them, I think as an author, and even if there's a separate narrator, I think it's really important to be able to find and have empathy.
Yeah.
Characters, and to find that, you know, that human core, you know. So maybe that's hopefully I achieved that.
Yes, absolutely. And how do you do that in terms of keeping tabs on even the characters that are not main characters? Do you keep a character journal? I mean, there's one scene, and I won't spoil it, where, you know, Claire and Deirdre are having a situation, and I'm so curious about Deirdre's, you know, what she's thinking, what she's feeling. Do you keep like a character journal even on those characters who don't necessarily have a POV?
I don't know if it's a character journal, but I do have a journal where I keep notes. And like I said, I actually started a story in her point of view, which, you know, which ultimately I don't think was wasted, because I think it came in handy I felt like I knew a lot more about her from that attempt when I got to the story that's in Claire's point of view and the situation that occurs there.
Okay.
I felt like I could I felt like that I could the dialogue was authentic, and that I could have a scene that was authentic in that situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I keep a journal and keep character notes in it.
Awesome. And then I cannot believe it's 5:41. But I want to
7:41, yeah.
definitely, I know, or 5:41 in LA, as you see the
Yeah.
lights go out. So I'll pare mine down to this last question and then open it up to audience questions. Please put your, I see Alexandra saying, put your questions in the chat. I will be happy to share those with Ramona so she can answer your questions as well. So my last question is, you deal with some heavy themes, the old South versus the new, socioeconomic divides, and the way you talk about poverty without saying poverty. I mean, it's just so real. We see the contents of, someone's purse, for instance, how much gas costs. It's just so well done. You deal with loss and death, all kinds of forms of loss. Loss of memory, as well as death, religion, educational disparities, race, sexuality, addiction. And yet there's so much beauty and humor in this work. How do you achieve this balance?
You know, they are heavy themes. And for me, somebody asked me pretty recently if I felt humor was important, and they didn't read a lot of humor and things. I said, I think it is, because I think in general, but I do know I grew up with a lot of people in the South who, whatever pain they were going through, when you got together in a group to like do whatever they were doing, play cards, whatever, suddenly everything was a joke.
That's so true.
Everything was a joke, and everything was deflected through humor.
Yeah.
My
family still does that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But there was almost this kind of rhythm to it, like joke, joke, joke. Oh, that's funny, and all these sayings, like, my uncle, yeah, I'm gonna get an X or whatever, and he, that dog won't hunt, and then joke, 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 and then something poignant. Mrs. So-and-so's husband died. Bad for her. Joke, joke, joke. It's like it's almost like a rhythm in a way. So I was trying to capture that, and I did feel that the humor was important. And what was the second part of your question? You had another, just the themes. You know, I guess in addressing those themes too, humor was one part of that, but I feel like, the place I was writing about, as all places, there's so much, it's wrapped up in so much history and culture, good and bad. And I was trying to get some of that through character, at one point I realized I remember I had put some stories through a workshop, and some people commented on the backstory, and I had, done sort of the typical, I'm writing the front story, now I have a module that's the backstory, and then you jump back to the present, and I had done some of those sorts of things, but it wasn't really working, because what I was realizing is that in doing so, I was creating separations and borders between the present and the past. And these characters, to me, were living in the present, but also living out of the past. They were both of those things existed for these people.
Okay.
And so then I thought, okay, well, then I've got to tie the backstory, as it were, or background parts that are important to things that are actually happening in the environment. It's got to be part of what's happening as it happens. Got to be enmeshed, the past and the present. So,
I think that makes me think of the country club, because the past is just all up in that country club, and yet they're dealing with the present, which some people aren't able to accept, this queer couple's life. Is that kind of an example of what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Side by side.
Yeah. The artwork of Aphrodite hanging on the wall, and then, this sort of like ideal idealized, feminine body and
Yeah.
and the people who are actually there and what's taking place. And yeah.
Wonderful. Can we squeeze in one tiny reading before just a couple of more of your
And then I'll just read one paragraph. This is just about Mobile, and it happens in the last story. There's a tornado at a Chuck E. Cheese. Babby, the other main character, is with her stepdaughter Tabitha, and they have to get a ride home because their car gets smashed with a stranger. So they're leaving the parking lot. And this is that paragraph. The road ran along I-65, the north-south interstate that petered out in Mobile. This was where you ended up, she thought, on a side road, driving along ditches that led to creeks crawling with water moccasins and mud, unless you changed course to I-10 toward Florida or Mississippi or some other state out west. People Babby met from other places said Mobile was a beautiful city, without knowing her parts of town. The scrub forest past the airport, the hunchbacked houses around the areas where the interstates junction, and farther out the double wides where the city bled into tarped and bandaged communities. The beauty of Mobile was not found in its downtown or midtown high-ceilinged homes with their historic nameplates, prim azaleas, and impressive oaks. The beauty swelled from the dirty bay, the muck of oyster beds and oil rigs, and the fume-scarred Bankhead Tunnel, named after some important person or other, and not the famous actress known for her quick wit and drunken escapades. The cracked and broken parts of the city, if taken as a whole, amounted to shapes, color, and light that made Babby want to live. That was her beautiful city. That and Tabitha was safe. Beauty enough for a day.
So gorgeous. So beautiful. Thank you, Ramona.
Thank you. Great questions. I love looking at the background.
I don't want to hog the floor. Do we have any audience questions? I see some beautiful comments. People love your reading. I love how you describe the rhythm of the humor, Ramona. Love the idea of living in the present and also out of the past. Another comment, I've read this and loved Ramona's male characters too. They felt honest and lived. And that's Steve Adams saying that. So yes, she nailed male characters. I absolutely agree. Alexandra, did I maybe miss any questions? Going back through.
We'd love to hear from you, everybody. This is a one in a lifetime or 3 in a lifetime chance to ask Ramona questions. I mean, I actually have one. One, I'm a poet, so I always love when I read fiction that on the sentence level is really in love with the word by word building of a story. And I just love that in your work. So that's just a comment. But just going off, I'm just gonna ask the first, and I want people to follow. I don't want to be the only one asking a question, but I'll just kickstart with one. I liked how you managed that situation with editors or potential editors wanting you to turn your linked short stories into a novel. You know what I mean? Like, there was this great, do you know Janet Frame, the great New Zealand author who has that great trilogy? She's okay, if you don't know her, she's fantastic. But she has this great moment in one of her novels where someone wants her to change something she's writing in her book, and she's like, and she says something like, they might be my mistakes, but they're my mistakes. And so I just think it takes guts to manage that. I mean, was there any moments where it wasn't so easy for you to figure out when to listen to your voice and when to follow, which is clearly expert opinions, So I just thought you could maybe talk a little bit more about some of the challenges and delights of that part of, sending out your book and hearing people's ideas on what it should be.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for what you said about the sentence level. Being a poet, I mean, I just feel like I could log off now and I would be happy for the rest of the month or year or whatever. So thank you. I mean, that was really, with agents, there, and people have lots of opinions about how things should go and would tell me a lot of different things. And I mean, I think I think I had sort of learned to parse some of that because I'd spent years by that point in a lot of workshops after spending years in a workshop in MFA, and then afterward in Austin with a writer, Kirk Walsh here, who's wonderful. She runs a workshop, and you know, there's a point at which it was like, okay, these people kind of get what I'm up to, and these people are not really getting what I'm up to, and here's who I should listen to. And you know, and then there were wonderful friends like Sheila Black, who I think she read the book twice in various forms, you know, and made comments on it. You know, a lot of it is probably the thing that I feel like the advice I hear a lot in writing workshops over again is just finding your trusted readers, and really, once you know, finding those people and really listening to them. You know, in fact, before it won the Drue Heinz, I mean, I had sent it out to some other contests and things, and I think one had sent back and said, "Oh, you've moved up to the next level," but I didn't hear anything, and so I sent it to a friend, and I said, "Do I need to revise this more?" And she read it, and she wrote back, and she said, "No, it's ready." She said, "But I don't like the title," and it didn't have this title at the time. It was
what was the title?
Yeah, what was it?
Upwardly Mobile.
Oh,
Yeah. And she said, "It sounds like that's going to be a rom-com or a, you know, happy-go-lucky, you know." She said, I can't tell you what it should be." And and I thought, yeah, she's right. And so I went back to that 1984 story, and I thought, this is the origin story. So I thought it feels right. It feels like the right title for the whole collection. So yeah.
I love
Yeah,
it.
that's a great story about trusted readers and then finding the real title for a book. Yeah. No, so thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that, Ramona. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I love that. And it looks like we have a couple of questions. Yay! From Joni, how many tries did you submit before getting accepted for the book getting published?
Well, like I said, I initially tried to get an agent with it, which didn't happen, and I was sad. So but I thought the way I thought it was going to go down, I had started a novel. I had a draft of a novel. So I thought, I'm just going to work on the novel and try and get an agent with a novel, which, by the way, I'm almost finished with now several years later. But you know, then if I can get one, maybe I'll turn around and say, "Hey, by the way, I've got this book of interconnected stories." But in the meantime, I don't know. I don't recall where my, you know, brain was, but there were a couple of contests that I thought looked really good, university presses, and I thought, well, maybe I'll try, you know, sending it out and just see what happens. So I think I sent probably about it's out to about 4 different contests, and like I said, one got back to me and told me that it moved up, but that it wasn't chosen. And then there was the Drue Heinz coming up, and there's no fee for the Drue Heinz, by the way, if you have a collection of short stories. And I just thought, well, you know, what are the chances? But it's free. I mean, it's free, right? So I sent it, and you know, and yeah, I was completely shocked that when they called. I mean, in fact, I didn't answer the phone the first couple of times they called because it was a number I didn't know. They had to actually email me and say, "Hey, can you call us?" And
Oh.
yeah, but yeah.
I love
But I
that.
worked on it for a long time. I mean, I probably worked on it off and on for I'm guessing about 7 years.
Yeah. Another question from Sheila. Ramona, I'm really fascinated by the enmeshed past and present. Did you discover or get surprised by your backstory, or did you start with the backstory? Just talk a little about that process, because one thing I love about the collection is the complicated connections between all the characters. Is that too a question of place? Okay.
Yeah. So the first part of that was, what did she say? Can't see the chat.
Did you discover or get surprised by
by the backstory?
Did you start with backstory?
Yeah. So because of the way I'd been, you know, I revised these stories a lot. Very often I knew the backstory, But the harder part then was when I decided that I didn't want to have huge chunks of text in backstory, then trying to incorporate that into the stories, because as you can imagine, that you know, basically kind of acted like a hand grenade of trying to, you know, incorporate those pieces. So so it took a lot of time to really take the backstory that I felt I needed and try to organically move that into places where it felt like I could mention it at the end of a sentence and then move back to the present, for example, or just have it as like Cassandra, like you were talking about in the Corinne story, where in the country club, you know, all the props, I'll call them, that are there, you know.
Yeah. And we don't get bogged down in backstory. It
You
keeps.
don't get, but you get it. You get the
Yes,
backstory.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and if it, you know, there is, and sometimes a character thinks in backstory. I mean, obviously, I mean, in that, which would be natural. That's the other thing. I mean, it would be natural if you say, if I go to a place in Mobile that I went to as a child, or I spent a lot of time, I'm going to think about, oh, there was this time I was here with my cousin, you know, or whatever. So those kind of instances, just locating those, so that it feels like a natural progression of, you know, the past and the present, that like enmeshment, I guess.
I love that, thinking in backstory. And they talk. I mean, my mom, she'll talk for 3 hours on the phone, and 75% of it is backstory about people I
Yeah.
know and don't know.
Yeah, exactly,
Just so
exactly.
Southern. Lots of great comments. I don't see another question. I had one quick question. How often were you writing in Mobile? I mean, it just felt like, I'm like, is she writing from memory, or is she going back and visiting Mobile to capture all of this real lush, atmospheric stuff? So were you going home a lot during the writing, or?
Well, my mother still lives there, so I visit
Okay.
her a lot, and you know, now she's getting older, but I was going back quite a bit. I still have quite a bit of family there, so you know, when I was writing it, I was probably getting to Mobile once a year. Now it's, you know, 3 or 4 times, but that wasn't occurring during the writing as much. But yeah, every time I was there, I was, you know, I had my journal out and I was taking notes and you know, and looking up things and trying to remember things. And I won't say exactly, but I did go into the country club in question, because I had one in mind and I'd never been inside it, and I just decided I was going to go in, and actually I just walked in,
Okay.
looked around and walked out.
I've never been in one of those.
Yeah, I thought, okay.
Yeah. Wow. And how has the reception been back home with family and just Mobile residents to the book?
You know, it's for the most part been really good. I mean, Mobile Bay Monthly did an interview, alabama.com interviewed me. I had after I read in Austin when the book first came out, the next day I read over at Page and Palette, which is in Fairhope, Alabama, which is across Mobile Bay from Mobile. And I remember telling my mom that night, because I really and truly did not know how many people. I said, you know, it'd be great if 20 people showed up. I said, that would make my night.
Yeah.
And 50 something people showed up, and we sold out of the book.
Oh, that's so great.
So it was, yeah, so it was nice. It was very nice. Yeah.
Oh, you deserve it, and so much more.
Oh, well, thank you.
Any lingering questions? We are at 6 o'clock my time and 8 o'clock your time, and 9 o'clock Eastern, if we have anybody on the East Coast. Robin says, I feel like many of these characters are part of them. Unforgettable scenes, Babby and Skipper, opening story, the empathy you have for your characters and that you create in them despite the most horrible things they've done, and the terrible victimization, the power you give them.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, thank you, Ramona. Anything else you want to add? Before we
Sandra's book is here with me. We are
Woo!
Bridges.
This is her night.
No, I'm just gonna say if you want to see her, you're in Central Texas. I'm sure you know the date, but it's October, Catherine Porter House, Texas State University. What is the date? Do you know?
Oh, I know it's October.
Okay.
I don't 23rd. I feel like that's for some reason. 'Cause
Okay.
it's I think it is my half birthday. My birthday is April 23rd. And I think I remember noting that. So I think it's October 23rd.
Yeah. So go hear her read.
I'm excited to come to Texas. I have a ton of my dad's from Texas, so I have a million cousins in Texas and a million in Louisiana. So
That's a great series, Cassandra. Congratulations. That's October 23rd.
I think
cool.
so that week. Yeah. Thank you.
Send Gemini Ink like a link to that, and we'll shout it out and everything like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you. Thanks so much to this wonderful audience. Thank you so much, Ramona. This was wonderful. I'm going to reread this book. I love it so much. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Cassandra, and thank you everybody for being here. And it just, Alexandra, Blake, everyone. My pleasure.
Yeah, we can't wait to see your next book, Ramona.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm trying, working on it. You know how it goes in the trenches.
I'm ready.
Well, thanks everyone. This was great. So many like gems of wisdom and just insights on the writing process, and then just also the great world of your linked stories too. So thank you, Ramona. Thank you so much, Cassandra. Yeah, wonderful questions.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone. We'll free you back into your lives, but we really appreciate that you're with us. We will, as Blake said at the beginning, this well is recorded, and you will see this. A link will be sent out to you, once it's a little finalized, so you can watch it again, share it with others. And we look forward to seeing you in August for our next Big Texas Author Talk. We'll be sending out information about that. And thanks so much, Ramona. It's just great to hear you talk about your first book.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you. Good evening.
Good night.
Bye.
Ramona, can we take a quick little screenshot?
Oh yeah, quick picture.
Oh, so good to see you. And let's make sure that it's not as long.
Yeah,
Next time.
absolutely. Well, I will see you in October for sure.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, Ramona.
Bye.
Bye.